Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this session. I know it's late on in the day, but we've got a really good session planned for you guys. We're going to be hearing from Chami, Walid Al Saqqaf, and I do hope to get Ian Redmond on the line. He's just running a little bit late, but we'll get him on the line shortly. I hope from the agenda that there's something interesting in here for you, but realistically, this is for our Guardian program, something that we're going to be talking about and something we believe in passionately is going to deliver real change for us and for the world at large. On our agenda today, we'll just have a little bit from the guys on how Rebalance came to be. These are three co-founders who've made this a reality, come together, and I want to hear a little of the backstory about how that came to be and just to give you guys a bit more information on that side. Then importantly, we're going to move on to what's in the pipeline, what have we got planned, because there's been a lot going on in the background. We want to make you guys aware of that. And then lastly, we'll have a session on what exactly is the Guardian program and importantly, what's in it for you. And then very finally will be the Q&A. We'll have 15 minutes at the end to make sure you can put your questions to Ralph, Walid, and hopefully Ian at the end of the session. So if you do have questions along the way, please be sure to put them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. And I'll start picking through those and I'll be putting them to our panelists at the end of the session. So welcome all. Welcome, guys. Walid, Ralph.
Hi.
Sorry, introduction done. So guys, the first question for you is how did Rebalance Earth come to be? Now I know as Walid, you are our resident blockchain and serial entrepreneur. Ralph, you're an economist. Ralph, I'd like to ask you the question first of what really drove Rebalance Earth come to be in your mind?
So, yeah, by the way, I ask myself that every day because every day is like, wow, is this really happening? And I text Walid and Ian, is this for real? And everybody else. Anyway, almost about 3.5, 4 years ago, I confided in a dear friend of mine that I would love to see the blue whales. And of course, if you want to see the blue whales, you have to be out in the wild and on the open sea. And I was lucky to find a place on a research vessel. And during that wonderful trip for about 2 weeks, I discovered what the scientists already knew, that the whales, big mammals, capture so much carbon on their body and indirectly. And so in an effort to help the scientists get that message to the policymakers and the segment of the society that was never involved in all of this, I translated the science into the language of the markets and policymakers. Basically, took the science. I felt I was interpreter, taking that science into the language of dollars and cents, trying to say, look, these incredible creatures are helping to save us, and the value of what they do is this much. And so we wrote the first paper, which got a lot of attention, and then I got a phone call from Fabio Berzaghi from Paris. Says, look, I'm a scientist, and we've done this study on the elephants, and you valued the services of the whales. Can you also help me do this? So again, hey, Ian. And so we did that with Fabio, and we valued the services of the forest elephants because, again, they're all under threat, even more, just like the whales and all other species. And the effort, again, is to help save them by showcasing the services, the importance of the services they do for our own existence. We know they're intrinsically invaluable, but it's what is it that they do for us so that basically we can bring them into the system and look after them for our own sake too. And then one day I get this phone call, this email from Walid saying, "Hey, I run Insure Blocks. I'm CEO of Insure Blocks, and I do these podcasts. This is intriguing. Can we have a conversation?" And so, having this conversation, and then at the end it's like, have you ever thought of, how to make this a reality? How you're trying to save these guys, you're trying to create these markets around them. Maybe we should just do it. I mean, that's what what he's like, let's just do it. And I said, yes, but he said, do you know Ian Redmond? I said, I know of Ian Redmond. I know, of course, I know of Ian Redmond. I followed his work. My friends followed his, but I don't know him. He said, well, I've just done an interview with him. So why don't we all have a conversation together? And that's exactly what happened, is just had a conversation. So I'm going to stop here in the interest of time and basically give it over to my colleagues.
Thanks, Ralph. I think that's a great segue into Walid, I think, right there. Walid, what was the sort of thought process between bringing these two big powerhouses together?
Well, the funny thing is that, when I was doing, as Ralph mentioned, this podcast on intro blogs about sustainable development and how blockchain can help reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And whilst I was preparing the briefing notes for my speaker, I heard at a conference that was a speaker called Ralph Chami. Okay, so I started reading what he wrote, and it just blew my mind. The fact that we valued nature when it's dead, a great whale, $50,000 for its meat, but its carbon capture services at $2 million. We value nature only when it was dead and not for alive. For me, was just nuts. And as a father of an 8 and a 10-year-old daughter, I don't want them to grow in a world that has those kind of values. And I built lots of startups, and it just felt, got to give it a try. So I harassed Ralph on LinkedIn saying, can I chat to you? Can I chat to you? And then it's like you say, you got to come on my podcast, and you say, well, I don't know much about blockchain. It's like, no, don't worry about that. I'll take care about that portion. The day I published it, William Vine, who is a member of the team, put a comment on LinkedIn saying, you should talk to Ian Redmond. That same day I messaged Ian, and Ian was like, yeah, let's have a chat. And that same day we had a call. And then just a few days later, the three of us talked. And it was just, 3 pieces of a puzzle that never knew they existed, suddenly just gelled. And we're like, you know what? This is just a tiny piece of a much bigger picture. And then suddenly we got 60 more pieces of the puzzle that joined in and gelled. And today we're getting a lot more pieces of that puzzle. And that's, I think, is what's so exciting about this journey, is that the picture is getting bigger and bigger. And what it looks like is a new way of looking at us as a society that lives in a symbiotic relationship with nature. And that we can get there without destroying our economy. We can do it, like Ralph mentions very often, how protecting nature can be profitable. And I'll stop right there, and I'll let Ian introduce himself and tell his piece of the story.
Thank you, Walid. You didn't say that since that first conversation, we've been talking every day since, which has been a pleasure. I have to admit, I don't think I've ever had a long, certainly not an extended conversation with an economist. So Ralph broke that mold, as he is doing to the academic discipline of economics, because economics have traditionally regarded nature as an externality. It's not part of this clever construct that humans have created to manage our affairs. And for that reason, there was never a lot to talk about between me and an economist, except that to point out to them that nature is the foundation of our economy. It might be an externality, but it's what that clever construct is sitting on. And if you destroy your foundation, as any builder will tell you, your building isn't going to stand up for very long. So yes, when I read about Ralph's work, and I was thrilled to find that he has read about my work, that there was obviously a meeting of minds that was long overdue. Because I have, as there is video testament to prove it, I've been banging on for years about the value of nature and the value of keystone species without whose efforts an ecosystem would collapse. And as you can tell from the backdrop, gorillas are one of my specialities and elephants are another. But I am fascinated by all life forms and how they fit together. So ecology is a science that really intrigues me. And my efforts to bring this into the thinking of policymakers haven't always met with success. I'll tell you a story. The first time I spoke at a UN meeting was in 1989 in Lausanne in Switzerland, at the Conference of the Parties of CITES, the UN Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. And I was part of a coalition of NGOs trying to get an Appendix 1 listing for African elephants, which at that time included all African elephants. Just 2 weeks ago, the African Elephant Specialist Group recognized the fact that forest elephants are a different species, not just a subspecies to the savanna elephants that are more familiar to people. And all the interventions from the NGO observers, the non-governmental observers that can't vote on these things but can try and influence the course of events if they have some expertise, we're talking about the value of ivory and the value of, for those who wanted to promote the trade sustainably, and the value of elephant tourism for those that didn't want to promote the trade. And I managed to get the floor and spoke about the role of the elephants in the ecology of the forest and how that too has an economic consequence. And the words of the chairman of Committee 1 still ringing in my ears. He said, well, that's different, but largely of academic interest, as if it had no sway. And it's taken from 1989 to last year to find an economist who thought, actually, no, there is quite a lot of economic relevance to the role of elephants. And I was mostly talking about their seed dispersal role. But what Fabio Bezzaghi, another key member of our team, and Ralph's co-author in his paper, demonstrated that not only do they disperse the seeds of so many species of trees, and so many of the rainforest giants that you see when you walk through a forest in the Congo Basin were planted perhaps 500, 600, 700 years ago by an elephant. But they tend the garden in the same way that if you were growing vegetables, you would take the wild flowers that we traditionally gardeners call weeds, but I don't like that word. Anyway, wildflowers growing in the wrong place, you remove them and put them on your compost heap. And when they've rotted down, you put them back as nutrient-rich compost. So you're taking away the competition for your vegetables, and then you're feeding your vegetables with the nicely rotted down compost. And that's essentially what elephants do when they eat the plants at the level that they can reach in a forest and then produce dung, lots of dung. Each elephant produces about 1 metric ton of dung every week. Big elephants more, smaller elephants less, but 52 weeks a year, tons of manure are fertilizing the plants in the forest. When the elephants trample and eat the small plants, that nutrient, that they're reducing the competition for the big plants, and the big plants are the one that sequester and store the carbon. So there you have it. That's why elephants not only plant the seeds of the trees of the forest, but they also improve their ability to sequester and store carbon. And that's what Ralph has worked out the value of. And that's what's making this whole exercise so exciting, because we can change the course of events for these keystone species, which will save their habitat, which provides ecosystem services to the world. So you look at all the non-governmental organizations that ask the public for charitable donations to help save elephants. It's because elephants are really nice and our children like them and they're fascinating and look at how intelligent they are and all those reasons. And they're good reasons. I'm not disputing those reasons. Same with the gorillas behind me. We haven't worked out yet how much carbon each gorilla is responsible for sequestering, but we will. And then we'll have another value so that gorillas or elephants, even if they're never seen by a tourist, will be valued not as valuable objects, but as workers in an ecosystem on which we all depend. And that's what's becoming increasingly clear. We destroy these ecosystems at our peril, and we have to start reconstructing them. The UN has declared this year as the first year of the decade of ecosystem restoration. That's fantastic. Who's going to pay for it? Well, charities will ask for a little bit of disposable income that you can afford to give to a charity. And governments will say, well, we could spend some taxpayers' money on this, but we have education, we have defense, we have health, we have all the important things that are people-centric. And there's very little left over for the eco-centric approach. Whereas Rebalance Earth, as Ralph will probably tell you in much greater detail, will internalize the cost of conservation into the wider economy. So it's not dependent on the little bit of tax money that the governments feel that their voters will allow them to give to nature. And it's not dependent on the little bit of charitable money that each of us can contribute to NGOs that are helping to save nature, all of which are important. But given the resources available to those who wish to destroy nature, the big corporations that want to dig up minerals or convert habitat into fields to grow crops to feed us all, those have had a free reign of it. That they have billions of dollars to spend, and little NGOs trying to raise £50,000 here to save this little patch of forest. It was never going to work. This is going to work. Okay, I'll shut up now. I have to leave at 4:30 for another meeting. But that's what I wanted to say. And I'm really glad that those of you who have joined this meeting are wanting to join this movement. It's not just a company, it's a movement.
Thank you, Ian. I think, the bit I picked up there was economic consequences. You said the impact that has on people's mindset around not just small charitable amounts. This is why this triangle really works: an economist, a conservationist, and a technologist coming together. And that takes us nicely into our next section, which is something I've termed just making plans and sort of what's in the pipeline. And I'd like to ask Walid just to talk about the multidisciplinary team that's really behind this, which is part of what we want Guardians to be as well. You know, we want them to understand that their positions in society and their roles is to take an active role in this, into spreading the message as passionately as Ian does.
Exactly, and I'll try to do as much justice to Ian in equalizing his level of passion. I think what is important to understand is that solving the crisis, there's no other words of using it, the crisis that we're facing cannot be done solely by just technology, or just by politics, or just by legal frameworks, or by any other singular approach. It requires a very wide, multidisciplinary approach. And that's why, we're very blessed that in our team of 60 coordinators and contributors, we have this whole range of skill sets. We have people from academia, we have economists, we have conservationists, we have musicians, we have technologists, startups, all kinds of people with all kinds of different skill sets. Because, as I said, the challenge is so big that it needs to be tackled from so many different angles. So that's one point. The second point is that even if we're super successful, it's going to take us time to reach that level of success. It's going to take us time to be able to protect as many of the keystone species around the world. That's why we're super keen to be part of a much larger coalition of other parties, whether it's governmental ones or not-for-profits or conservationists or even enterprises. We need this grand coalition of individuals, companies, and governments to be tackling this crisis we're all facing. We're happy to be at the front as much as to be at the back. We just want the job to be done. And that's really our position. And one more thing I just want to state in terms of the team. This is a team that was born out of COVID. It's a team where 95% of us have never met, right? Except through Zoom calls, Teams, and so on. But what binds us is those three principles which we live by. It's to be human, have love, and give hope. And that really binds us together as a team, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change our values in society so we can live in a more harmonious way with nature. It has to be done. We can't keep taking out of nature without the consequences of that. We can't keep killing keystone species or putting them into extinction and destroying ecosystems and not have the consequences of it. We've been doing it for decades, keep pushing the problem to some other generation, right? It can't be pushed anymore. So we have to act.
And this isn't all guesswork or doesn't have any real ability. I know from the conversations that have been going on that there's huge traction on this already. Some of the people you've been talking to, we obviously can't mention them just yet.
Yes.
I'd love to be doing that from a marketing perspective, but one day. So Walid, I would like to just talk on some of the traction we've been getting, some of the successes. I think some of the shock I think we've seen that is how well this is resonating with people, this model. And then latterly, just to talk about the project we have lined up, our first real project. It'd be nice to give the audience to actually understand there's something happening behind this. It's not all just talk.
Sure. So in terms of traction, so from that burgeoning little idea the three of us had, as I said, we managed to get this team of 60, and then we got, the support from senior government officials in Gabon to be able to launch a pilot. The aim is to launch by the end of this year. So it was great to be able to get that kind of support, at a government level. We then were blessed to receive 4 magnificent MBA students from the Warwick Business School who has lent us, their support. We're getting a number of enterprises who are lining up to be part of the pilot. So what I mean is that when we launch the pilot, we're going to want each enterprise to commit to a minimum of $250,000 of offset. And ideally, we want 5 companies, one representing an industry and ideally a geography. Again, to show that this is a global problem that we're tackling, and we're taking it with a global point of view. And we're making good progress on that front. We're also making good progress with a number of technology companies who are going to be offering us some of their facilities, on a pro bono basis or a severely reduced platform. This is a for-profit company. We're applying to become a B Corp, but it does mean we have no money. We're all volunteers. We're all doing this as fundamentally as an act of love, but also as an act of, we know something has to be done, and we're going to put our time and our resources into making it happen. And we're very lucky that we're getting this kind of traction and support. I mean, Ian or Ralph, you can mention it. We had a workshop not too long ago with the World Bank, who were their eyes were just wide open. They thought this project was one of the most pioneering and innovative ones they've come across. Because if I look at some of the questions that are appearing, I need to be clear. We're not a carbon offsetting project. Okay, there are many carbon offsetting projects that are out there. What we are about is taking carbon offsetting as a mechanism to fund keystone species who they protect the natural biodiversity of their local area. You cannot fight climate change by just having a myopic view of what is carbon offsetting, which is let's just planting trees, which is great, but planting trees does not stop the mass killing of species like the African forest elephant. Close to 90% of them up to now. That's not going to stop. It does not stop the destruction of entire natural ecosystems. Again, we're taking a myopic view of how we're going to fight climate change. You need to take a more holistic point of view. And no wonder it hasn't been done, because you know what? It's really hard. And that's the thing that we've set ourselves the target to, and to put all of our thinking into it. So we've had some really great traction. And I'm happy to listen to your next question, Red.
Well, so thank you everybody for the really nice messages in the chat and all your questions that are coming in via the Q&A panel as well. We will get to those, so please keep adding questions for the team. It'd be really great to hand over to Ian, actually, to hear some of the challenges about this project in Gabon. Ian, I believe you've got another 5 minutes with us, so I do want to use that time effectively. So maybe some of the challenges that African elephants, because we're trying to introduce the idea of sensors, the technology behind it, and supporting the communities. Maybe just a little piece from you on that.
Well, I guess the biggest challenge that elephants face is that really clever, dexterous, artistic humans have found wonderful ways of creating ornaments out of their front teeth, which means that to most people, to make money from the kind of habitat you see behind me now, I've switched from gorillas to forest elephants. The only way you can do that is by cutting down the trees and selling the timber, or killing the animals and selling the valuable bits. And for most animals, that's meat. I mean, elephant meat is also sold, but primarily the loss of forest elephants, which is more than 2/3 over the past 20 something years, it is driven by the illegal ivory trade. So even though African elephants have been listed on Appendix 1 of CITES since 1989, we were successful then, with the exception of some southern African countries that managed to get a downlisting to Appendix 2 for trade under very, very strict conditions. That attitude that elephants are only valuable when they're being watched by tourists who have paid money to stay in a lodge and paid fees to go into a park, or when they're dead and you can carve their tusks. Those are the only two values people have discussed. So the first thing we have to do is to open people's eyes to this new value. When we've done that, I think all those in the past that were tempted by organized criminal gangs that came into a town and bought a few beers in a bar and say, hey, I need some guys to carry tusks. Are you up for it? And they say, might get shot by rangers. Yeah, but I'll give you $200. Now, given that each elephant is valued at $80 per day for the carbon sequestration attributable to him or her, anyone who knows that is going to say, $200, get lost. We get more than that for 3 elephants in a day. We want to keep our elephants alive because our community will benefit more from that income. So that's fine. So each day that an elephant is proved to be alive, a known elephant who's on our books. So we're selling the services of known individual elephants. That's another different thing in conservation. We're used to it now with mountain gorillas. We name them all. Every year, Rwanda has a naming ceremony where every new cohort of infants born since the last year's party, the Kwita Izina, is given a name hosted by the president, dignitaries, and all sorts of people come and have the honor of naming a baby gorilla. We're going to do that sort of thing, take that approach for forest elephants, because each individual who is named and identifiable by the shape of the ears or the tusks, or if that's difficult, by the voice. Each elephant has a different voice, and we hope to be able to recognize individuals from their voice. And as a last resort, by collecting dung and getting the DNA analyzed so that we know who it is. Once we know who it is, then the number of days since the last time that individual was identified are added up, and that number, say 10 days times $80, $800 is released into this asset-backed token system that Walid has conceived of, and will ultimately benefit the rangers who protect the elephants in the protected areas and the communities who need to start thinking about protecting them outside of those protected areas. So the challenge is identifying individual elephants, monitoring them on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be every day. If an elephant migrates, and they do migrate into neighboring countries and come back a year later, if that elephant is known and has not been monitored while it's been away, then obviously that whole period of time, the carbon finance is released. And we need to have an agreement between neighboring countries or even neighboring districts within one country so that the dividends are shared equitably between them. And as an ambassador for the Convention on Migratory Species, we will be helping governments come up with bilateral or trilateral agreements that cover that element of this. So that's another one of the challenges, that the fair and equitable distribution of this finance to do the most good. And it won't be going into the pockets of individuals. It won't be accidentally turning into a Mercedes-Benz or a villa in France. Sorry, guys, this is going to do good on the ground for communities and for protected areas, and therefore for the planet. And those are our core values, I think.
Sorry, Ian. I know we could talk about this at length, and I'm glad to see the tokenization is coming in there. But I want to give the last word to Ralph, really, on you were talking about the value, etc. I just want to get a view from Ralph in terms of how do we value these animals, some of the specifics. It'd be really great just to hear that from you, Ralph.
Well, the first thing is we do not value the creatures themselves. Life is priceless. And all creatures, big and small, are intrinsically valuable. What we're doing here, we're just saying in this case, the elephant provides a service. How much is this service worth to us? I work for the National Monetary Fund, and I provide presumably a positive service for which they pay me a salary. That could be debatable with my boss, but they do. So, so we're doing the same thing. We're saying, look, these creatures are providing a service to humanity. So, but for some reason, although that service is valuable, and that's what we did, we valued that service. In the case of the elephants, it was on average $1.75 million. The price of their service in the markets right now, alive, as Walid was alluding to, and Ian, is zero. How is it that in this that someone gives you value, and it's positive? It's like I build you a chair and you don't pay me anything. I'm a carpenter. I build you a table and you don't pay me. In fact, worse, in the case of the elephant, it's a negative price. You kill the elephant. Only when you kill it, suddenly it has a positive price. So what we're trying to do, and that's actually a symptom of the imbalance of our life with nature. And that's why we called it rebalance. We're not trying to rebalance nature. We're trying to rebalance us. We're saying we are out of balance. Nature's always in balance. Okay, we are the ones who sort of strayed off. Now, if we had more time, I can talk about theoretically and philosophically, but I know. So what we do here, I'm a financial economist. I wasn't even an environmental guy. I'm not an environmental economist. Anybody can look at my record. I publish in asset markets, banking, stuff like that, fragile states. I've never done anything like this. I just approached it as, hey, here's an entity that's providing service. How much is that service worth to us? So in the case of the elephant, we look at the elephant over its lifetime. And this elephant as it goes around, you have a population of elephants. Some of them live, some of them die. They give give birth to new elephants, and some of them live, some of them die. And over the span of, let's say, 100 years, we look at the value in terms of the carbon that they would be actually adding in the forest due to the work that they've done, as Ian has described it. And then you discount all of that to the present. I'm a financial economist. I can do this in my sleep. I used to teach financial instruments, and I practiced it in the markets too with my two colleagues, Tom Cosimano and Conal Fullenkamp. So we can do this. So what we did, we looked at it purely and the reason we did it that way, because I did not want to preach to the converts. You see, the conservationist, you're preaching to the convert. I wanted to bring in the people who've been outside the tent, that have been ostracized, the what's in it for me crowd, if you like. The policymakers who were ostracized and kept out of the conversation while we conservationists just talked among each other. No, we need to save the elephants. We need to save the trees and the whales. And the rest of the guys with the resources and they're like looking at us, and we don't want to talk to you because you make money. No. If we're going to solve a problem, we need everybody inside the tent, everybody holding hands and coming together, because this is our own existence. I mean, there's nothing else more important than this, because if we lose this battle, there's nothing else. It's not worth talking about anything else. Walid has kids. He wants them to see a better day. I have a son. I want him to see about it. Even if I didn't have children, I want to feel that there's something we're doing. And by the way, this is doable. This is not a pie in the sky. Why? I came from the markets. I traded assets I had never seen. I traded mortgage-backed securities, CDO squared, all these things, which somebody told me they have value. And suddenly I was buying them, selling them, investing in them. And now I come and tell you, here's an elephant. You can feel it. You can touch it. You can smell it. You can see, and you're telling me, how do we do this? It's in front of you. This one you're having a hard time seeing, but you don't have a hard time seeing a mortgage-backed security that you've never touched, you'll never meet. I mean, this is how ridiculous this conversation is to me as a financial economist. So we're approaching it wide-eyed. And if we have time, we can explain to you how, luckily I met these two wonderful people with the 60 others, because Walid is the one who said, listen, man, we can do this. We have the technology to do this, because I want him to talk about the technology.
I don't want to interrupt your flow, Ralph, but I have to be in another tent, virtually speaking, because if we are going to win the world over, we need to educate them. And we're launching a new streaming platform called EcoFlix. And they're ringing me now saying, you're late, Redmond. So would you excuse me? Thank you all for joining this meeting. I'd love to stay longer, but I got to go.
Thank you, Ian. Always appreciated. Thank you, Ralph. That was really passionate. I think getting an economist passionate about this, that just tells you it's ticking all the right boxes. I'm really conscious I do want to spend a good amount of time on the Q&A. So Walid, with that in mind, I do want to talk about what the guys get. We created this Guardian program. Why does it exist? And what does it mean after this call? Do you want to jump into that?
Yeah, sure. So as I alluded to, all three of us alluded to, this is a global initiative, right? And it will take a lot more than just 60 of us, who are in the core team to really build this out. What we need is to create what I call a Greta Thunberg movement. That Swedish activist has managed to get millions of people all around the world to protest, to put climate change on everyone's minds. We need to reproduce that, but not just about protesting, but just to say, we want to protest and we want to show you there is here a solution where we can have keystone species effectively fix the mess that we have done as a society. Instead of killing them, let's provide an environment where they can reproduce and grow the biodiversity in which they live in, because it is only through that manner that we can really save our planet. So we need advocates, we need guardians, like yourselves, to basically amplify the voice in whatever social media channel that you're the most comfortable in, whether it is LinkedIn, whether it is Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever that is. Own it, speak about it, spread the word. If there are companies with whom you worked with, or you're working with now, or you're friendly with, and you think they should be part of the 5 for the pilot, let us know. We want to know that. But more importantly, we really want your creativity. We want your heart. We want all your goodwill and for it to interact with us and interact between each other, because out of that will come some beautiful ideas. And if I may share a screen, so we've created a platform recently for all of you, really. It's the Guardian's Rebalance Earth platform. I hope you can see my screen. But it's a news feed where you can create a profile very much like you can on Facebook or on LinkedIn. And there you can meet, 40 of us on this platform, and you can see all kinds of different pieces of content. You can see the members. But the idea is really for you guys to use this as a space to be able to meet each other, to share ideas, to share strategies on how we can do this. But also, you could argue to hold us accountable. We've got a big group that is called the Ethics Working Group that is here to hold us to accountability and to our values, to what we're setting ourselves to. And I noticed, one of the questions being asked, is this a public-private partnership? No, this is a private company. It's a private company going after a $100 billion market, according to Mark Carney, the ex-chancellor of the Bank of England. And yes, but at the same time, we're applying to become what's called a B Corp. So where we're reinvesting all the profits that are made in the company into science, into sensors, so that we can value every single keystone species on this planet as fast as possible and put them onto the platform, so that an enterprise, a household, an individual, when they come onto Rebalance, they can choose, do they wish to rebalance their lifestyle or their firm with an elephant, with a great whale, with an orangutan, with a rhinoceros. You will be able to choose. And of course, we would want to make sure it is as diverse as possible, so that not one species gets more affection than another. But this is our plan. And we really are looking for you, to provide, again, your ideas, your innovation, your voice, and your heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Walid. And I just want to stress that we'll be there on that platform to help you make that happen. It's not just saying, hey, you're here, thank you, go do a job. We don't want that to be the case. We've got great people in our team already, very knowledgeable, and it's a real community out there for us already. And we just want to extend that to you as well. And I should stress that we're just closing in on, we're just under 100 Guardians already signed up via our website, which I think is a great thing to just show people are, already taking interest in something we've been working on since November 2020. So thank you. And obviously all those invites will be going out afterwards. So do please join us there, engage with us. We'll be engaging with you and trying to put as much material in your hands so as you can tell this story as well. And that's the only way that this becomes a movement as opposed to a project. And I should say, for everyone asking, we will be sending out this recording as well for you to watch or share with anybody. That'll also be on the social network as well. But thank you all for your comments. I think, Ralph, everyone seems to want to come and visit your tent at some point, wherever it is. So everyone's really excited about that tent. Let's move on to Q&A. So thank you. All the questions have been coming in. I think, Walid, you've obviously seen a couple already. Is there any one that catches your eye that you want to tackle first?
So I'm just actually putting in the chat box also the link to the Guardian platform, so you can you can click on it now and get to it. So I'm just going to work in reverse order of the latest question we received. So one is from Chris regarding the blockchain. So it's going to be a permissioned-based blockchain to start off with. It's not going to be a public one just yet. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is the blockchain partner that we're going to be selecting in the coming time is got to meet our technical requirements, but also got to meet our strategic requirements. So basically, it would be from a technology provider that can not just provide us the platform ideally on a pro bono basis or as close as pro bono, but can shout about it and can use some significant marketing power to spread the word about Rebalance Earth, but also to get their existing customers to start using Rebalance Earth as a platform to rebalance themselves. Because if you think about the power of it, they could say, hey, all the firms in the world can now prove that they're carbon neutral on this blockchain platform. And I think that's a very powerful message. So we're using a permission-based blockchain, and also because we need to protect elephants' location. We do not want our platform to be a place where effectively poachers can find out where the elephants are. So we have to be extremely careful about that. So there are a number of other technical reasons why we're going from a permission-based blockchain, but I do foresee in the future that this could become some kind of hybrid, because we do wish to work with other carbon offsetting platforms, that whether they're about tree carbon offsetting or soil, and work with them to establish a common data standards around what is a carbon unit and its pricing, and also to facilitate interoperability between the platforms, because it's only that way you can do it really at a market level, a major impact. Oh, yeah, you're on mute, Red.
Just noticed. As I say, Kathy, as well, to your 12-year-old niece who's watching, who wants to join as a youth ambassador. Walid, let's get cracking on that.
Yep.
A question here from Matt Tomset. As ignorance is such a major factor in the assault on biodiversity and nature itself, how does the team plan to educate at all levels? Ian, I think, mentioned that briefly, but hand it over to you, Walid.
Yes. So there's a couple of ways we're going to do that. I mean, even in terms of describing in our mission statement, this is something, to be honest, we struggled with for a couple of reasons. One is, even here, when I described at the beginning, we're using carbon offsetting to fund keystone species for them to do the work on biodiversity. Carbon offsetting, most people get it. Keystone species, some do. Biodiversity, again, some do. So it's about trying to find the right kind of vocabulary that can both incite an emotional reaction and can be clear enough in terms of what it is you're doing. And that is quite a big piece of work. And if anyone has some suggestions, we'll be happy to listen to them. But yeah, education is a big piece. The biggest problem that we have today is that nature is here and we're here. There's such a huge gap between that. I mean, there was even some studies done, with kids, and they ask them, what's a chicken? And they'll, instead of showing you a real life chicken, they'll show you, what's in their plate. There's a huge disassociation. And one of the things that we're very intent on doing is reducing that. And one way of doing it is when individuals, households, and enterprise offset their carbon emission and rebalance their lifestyle, it goes to a keystone species. So in this instance, the African forest elephant. And they will have the elephant for a couple of days, couple of weeks, or a year, depending on how much they're offsetting. They can name that elephant. It could be, that's Jessie, that's my elephant. She's doing that service. I can listen to her from yesterday's file because Rebalance Earth has a number of sensors in the forest, including sonic sensors, which are useful not just to detect that the animal is alive, but also to detect the sound of gunshots, so we can send the park rangers to go and intercept. And the camera traps are also going to be taking pictures, so you can see your elephant. This is very powerful, because imagine when you're taking a flight from, let's say, from London to New York, or to Washington, D.C. to go and spend some time in Ralph's tent, for example. Most airlines, so you can offset your flight by buying 20 metric tons or whatever of carbon. That means nothing to most people. I know it definitely means nothing to me. But if they say, listen, you can offset your flight by paying 1 day of Jessie's work, here's a picture of her, sound of her, there you create an emotional reaction. So it's about shortening that gap between individuals, enterprises, and nature as much as possible. And that's how we're going to tackle this education challenge.
I'd like to, so Lisa Aronson put a question to us. Can you explain the basic concept of value carbon capture services? And you elaborated on that, Lisa, as well. The elephants produce dung, which causes the plants to flourish, and the plants create the carbon, correct? Question mark. So Ralph, some of the services you've explored on this, I know things that Ian touched on this a little bit in terms of trampling some of the forest there, some of the things they do. Could you talk about some of the services that as a keystone species elephants actually provide?
Yes. So in the case of, just to focus directly on this question, the study that Fabio Berzaghi and the other scientists published in a peer-reviewed journal, and this is, by the way, very recent, 2019, what they're able to show is that these forest elephants, these are not the savanna elephants. We don't know yet what the savanna elephants are doing, and we plan to study that too. These forest elephants, as they go around and and foraging and doing their business, they trample on basically young shoots, and they eat, and through their foraging they allow the older trees to grow bigger, and the older trees and plants, as they grow bigger, they sequester more carbon. There's above ground carbon and below ground carbon. We're just looking at the above ground carbon. Actually, we're not even looking at the below ground carbon, which is already there too. And what they were able to show is that those elephants, through their lifetime, are able to increase carbon sequestration in the forest by up to 7%, which is a huge amount. So when we studied that, and that's a published work, you can freely downloadable from Social Science Research Network. It's called Value of Natural Capital Applications to Elephants and Whales, with the scientists also with us. Anyway, so what we do is we look at how much carbon is being sequestered in the trees over the lifetime of the population. So you can take it up to be 100 years, 150 years, whatever. And basically, so you take accounting of how much carbon is being accumulated, you take account of the stock, you take account of the flow, but you need to be careful to discount properly, and then you take a present value of all of these. And then why is it carbon? I mean, some people always ask me, why not biodiversity? And I always say carbon because there's a market for carbon. Yet there is no market for biodiversity. I don't know what is the price of biodiversity. Do elephants do other things? Of course they do other things. But what is the price of the other things? I mean, Ian is after me all the time. He says, you got to look at their dung. Their dung is valuable. I say, I am sure it's valuable. The gorillas are valuable, but we need the science. So part of the work that Walid and Ian and I are doing, and all of the wonderful people that are working with us, is to grab attention, people, and say, look, you need to fund the science. This is science about us, about our nature. Look how wonderful. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg, what we found out about the elephants. I'm sure we're going to find out about all other species, that they're all playing a role in all of this. We focus on the carbon because the market exists, prices exist. And by the way, for the audience that is listening in, when we did the study on the elephants, last year, Walid was, we were looking at the numbers again. Walid said, hey, by the way, Ralph, have you noticed the price of carbon went up? When we did the study, it was $24 and some cents, and now it's $36. If you look at the Bank of Canada, it's saying the price of carbon is going to go to $100. If you look at the Bank of England circular a few months ago, it's talking about $100, even going up to $700. There are econometric studies saying the price of carbon tonnage is going to go up to $1,200 per. I mean, so the value of the services of the elephant is going to skyrocket. Okay, and so again, we're looking at how much carbon, and then what we want to do really is, but the value, you have the science, you have the valuation, but that's not enough. The beauty of it is now, why now? Because you have the technology, Walid's technology that he's bringing in, that knowledge of how to bring transparency, governance, all these issues. But we have the science, but what is missing is the policy. We need the policy change. We need the governments to basically look at the elephants in this case and say, this is a national treasure. This is no one is going to touch this. This belongs to the country where they are, or the countries where they roam. Okay, and what we're doing, we're selling their services, just like I go to work, you go to work, and you get paid. But the beauty of what we do is the value of their services only accrues if they are able to live freely, life fully, to enjoy, just like you and me enjoy life fully, presumably, they are supposed to enjoy. That's how you get that value. It's not by tying an elephant to a tree or or doing any harm to it. In fact, we've spent so much time with Walid and all the volunteers and trying to figure out what is the technology that is least intrusive, because we don't want to be in there with the elephants. So the carbon sequestration would happen if these elephants are able to move freely, live freely, give life, to new populations and grow into old age just like we do. That's how you accrue the 7%. And that's the 7% that is so valuable. And by doing so, I just figure I would answer maybe another question may have arisen, is when you're selling that service, look how beautiful this thing is. You are not selling the elephants. You are not selling the forest. The forest grows because the elephants are helping it. The elephant population grows. The local communities that live around it would benefit. The local governments would benefit because the consumption base expands. The revenue from the increase in consumption would expand. The environment would benefit from a healthier environment. The companies that Walid is talking about, those 5 companies, would benefit from offsetting their carbon footprint. And we all benefit from coming back to nature, to the natural world from which we came, from which we seem to have lost. It's like somebody walked away from home and couldn't find his way home. And what we're doing, we're drawing that line back for you. Come home. Because home is, but now you come home as an informed person. You left home when you were ignorant. And now you're coming home after you've been fully informed about the wonder, about this wonderful nature that we live in. And come here, and we call it the win-win model. This is not a win-lose proposition. No one loses in our world. When Walid was talking to me with Ian, we agreed among each other, is this a win-win? Is there anybody left out? And we said, no. Animals will thrive. Nature will thrive. Local communities will thrive. Businesses will thrive. Governments will thrive. Nature thrives. What more do you want? What are we waiting for? I mean, what is it going to take us to do this?
Thank you, Ralph. I think you've answered actually quite a few of those questions that were coming in on there. So great job. I just want to say thanks, Spencer, for putting forward the link to some of Ralph's research as well. We'll also have that on the Mighty Networks community that Walid's already shared. So please make sure you're subscribing there. We'll also be sending out an email afterwards if you missed that in the chat. But there's loads of material there. These guys have decades of research and material that's all online, and some really interesting tidbits in there as well. Walid, do you want to take that last question?
Names. Wait, which one? My research on that dung. Which one is the last one?
so I say that Eric's come through the question. Yes.
Yeah. So actually, it kind of sits with a series of other questions I've been seeing, and let me explain to you guys why this is very different to everything else that exists today, and why, if we come back to what Ralph just mentioned, it's a win-win-win. So let me walk you through a scenario of how this works. So let's take an example of Barclays Bank wishing to offset 1 million metric tons of carbon. So what would happen? It would check on our platform how many elephants are available to service that contract, i.e. they're not servicing any other contracts. So let's say we identified those 3. Then Barclays would, for argument's sake, put $1 million into an escrow account for the value of that contract over 1 year. Now, in the forest, we have a number of sensors. Those sensors are camera traps, there's sonic sensors, and simple dung testing of the poo. What these sensors are here to do is to effectively prove that the animal is alive and in the forest, and thus is servicing the contract. Those tokens are issued for every single elephant alive and in the forest, and it is backed by the money that sits in the escrow account. That's roughly $80 a day per token. They go to pay the park rangers who protect the animals, and they go, more importantly, for micro investments in the local communities that reside within the forest and just outside of the forest. And those tokens can be spent in local shops. All the shop owners need to have is a phone to receive the tokens. And the micro investments, the community decides how they wish to use them. Do they wish to build a health facility? Do they wish to build a school? Do they wish to build fencing around their small agricultural plots? They choose. At the end of every month, for argument's sake, those tokens are sent back to us. And then we have an automatic reconciliation of exercise between tokens issued and tokens received. And we send them the cash equivalent back to them. So why are we doing it this manner? First of all, Barclays gets an efficient carbon offsetting mechanism. Today, the carbon offsetting market is very murky and it's full of middlemen who are here to make a quick buck. Here we have one middleman, the elephant. Second, Barclays gets every month a corporate social responsibility message of how we transform their carbon dollars in carbon for social good. They see how many schools have been built, how many health facilities have been built. Now, I want to spend a little bit more time on this key element, the sensors, and why this is so important. Because as I said, they're here to prove that the animal is alive and still in the forest. The second purpose is they're here, sonic sensors can detect the sound of gunshot, and we can send the park rangers to intercept the poachers. The third and most important purpose is to collect all this data that we have. It includes data that's not necessarily related to the elephant and freely open source it to the scientific community, because we want them to work with us to unlock biodiversity. We all know biodiversity is important, but we do not have a dollar sign associated to it. And we're going to be using the carbon offsetting mechanism to fund effectively the unlocking of biodiversity so we can create a secondary market of biodiversity credits and move the conversation from carbon offsetting to biodiversity. And one of the ways we're going to do that is we found out that a lot of the conservation groups that are already, for example, in Gabon and in other countries around the world, have a lot of this data. A chimp project we talked to has been monitoring the apes for the last 6 years. And their camera traps have tons of images of elephants. They're going to give it to us for free. But more importantly, what we want to do is set up a data marketplace with all conservationist projects around the world who are monitoring a keystone species, whether it is the great whale, whether it is the lion, whether it is the orangutan or the kangaroo. And for each data that they give to us, we will pay them in tokens. So effectively, what we're doing is that we're also funding science. We're funding conservationist projects. And that's all thanks to the elephant, who is supporting 3 ecosystems. The first one is a natural one. It's not just the trees, the gardening of the trees, as Ian says. It's also all the insects and all the other animals that live in the forest that the elephant is taking care of. He's also taking care of the human local ecosystem, $80 a day for micro investments and for job creation opportunities. And of course, the science ecosystem. And I wanted to give you an idea of how this could look like. In terms, this is just a concept of a dashboard, what it could look like for, like, example, Apple as a client. So this is how much has been offset. This is the value of the contract, some of the benefits. And here's an example of a school that's been built with your carbon dollars. But I think the next slide is the most powerful one. These are your 6 elephants that are servicing your contract. You can go back in time and click on any one of those dates, and you can see a different picture of Sarah the elephant or Tufi. And you can listen to the sound file that's been captured through the sonic sensor. This is what I was telling you before. It's about bringing nature back to people, back to enterprises, and bringing it closer.
Walid, thank you. I didn't think we'd get into that much detail, but also thank you to everybody for the really great questions. It's really helped push the conversation along as well. I'm really sorry we didn't get into bird migrations and bees as keystone species. Maybe we'll do something on that in the future, get Ian back in, and we can do something on that subject as well. But just want to round it off by saying thank you so much for attending, sticking around to the end as well, giving us your questions. Be sure to get on to our community side as well. As I said, I'll be circulating invites to you all, thanks to your participation in the Guardian program. I'll include the recording of this. Please tell friends and family and colleagues, etc. That's the point. We want this. You can see it's a very passionate project for us, and we want that to be passed on. We feel there's something here, and we hope that you do as well. In the future, we're also planning to have other sessions, which I'd just like to draw your attention to. We've got a really great one. We'll have another one similar to this, just for the rest of the world. That's why we wanted to do something special just for you guys, just to really address the Guardian program. But in the future, we'll have another roundtable with Ralph, Walid, and Ian, and hopefully we'll get into some more of that detail, because there was plenty there anyway. We didn't cover half of it. Secondly, we've got another session lined up with Born Free, William Travers, the president there as well, Walid and William having a fireside chat. And we're planning on having more and more on terms of these subjects. We've got loads of people, loads of specialists in this field that we want to tap into and bring more and more information to you. And that's part of what the Guardian program is that we want to inform you guys as well. So thank you again for sticking around. And we hope to see you on the community where you can ask us these questions as well, because unfortunately we didn't get through half of them, I don't think. Thank you all, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Please put them on the community platform. We'll answer them as fast as we can. But thank you again. It's lovely to have you all on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Red. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Good to
guys.
see you, Walid.